Shalom, it's Allison, social media manager here at Drops, and I am back for, sadly, my final update for the 90 Days with Drops challenge. If you guys have been following along, then you know that Shannon, our resident polyglot, and I were both studying Hebrew for the 90 Days with Drops challenge to get ready for our team trip to Tel Aviv. I'll get back to that trip in just a minute, but first I want to touch on my stats from the challenge. So throughout the challenge, I learned a little over 300 words in Hebrew, and I got 62 out of 90 days completed. So that number isn't exactly accurate for my learning. There were days that I started a lesson at just like a little bit before midnight, and then I ended after midnight. And the lessons don't count as the day that you start them, but on the day that you finish them. So there were some days that just didn't count as the day before because of when I started the lesson. And there were definitely days, that I just didn't study. I think we all know that the last 90 days, like in the broader scope of the world, have been super crazy and not what any of us were really expecting to have happen. So towards the end of the challenge, my stats, or at least my days of learning, went way down. And that's, things do happen, and even if you didn't hit a perfect 90 days in the challenge, that doesn't mean that you didn't accomplish something. I didn't hit 90 days, but I still accomplished learning over 300 words in Hebrew, which I think is pretty great. One thing that I found out about myself during this challenge was that the 5-minute time limit that we have for all free users, and even if you're a premium user, you can set the time limit to 5 minutes. That 5 minutes is really important for me. I know in my last video I said that I was going to up my time limit to 15 minutes a day, and when I did that, I noticed that I didn't retain words nearly as well as when I did the 5-minute increments. So after a while of doing the 15-minute increments, and once I made that realization that I wasn't learning quite as well, I went back to the 5-minute increments, and I think that has part of a reason behind why I didn't learn nearly as many words as I thought that I might learn. So my trip to Tel Aviv was really eye-opening in terms of practicing and learning Hebrew. One thing that a lot of people don't know about Hebrew, or if you've never tried to learn Hebrew, things you just wouldn't know, is that there aren't really vowels that are written in the language. There are a couple, but for the most part, vowels just don't exist in a written form. The way that they tell you what vowel sound is coming after a consonant is with little dots on the letters. When I was in Tel Aviv, I actually asked someone about this. She was a British woman that was living in Tel Aviv. She's lived there for almost 20 years. And she was telling me that as a child, you use these dots to learn the vowel sounds. Then at a certain age, and it's definitely still in childhood, they remove these dots from the words. And so when you're an adult and you see these signs and instructions and menus and things, these don't have the dots on them. So it's just assumed that you know the vowel sounds. Of course, if you're a learner of Hebrew, you don't know these sounds. But everyone that grows up speaking Hebrew learns them very early on. And that's something that's really interesting. Even though I didn't learn every single word in the app before I went to Tel Aviv, it was really awesome to be in a place where everyone is speaking the language that you are learning. One morning I was in a coffee shop and the barista was having like a laughing attack. She was just giggling like uncontrollably. And, she turned to me at one point and she says, slicha, which means sorry. And it was just really cool to hear her say that and to understand what she was saying to me. Also, when I arrived in Tel Aviv, I took a taxi from the airport and I had a conversation with my taxi driver, not in Hebrew, mostly in English, about numbers in Hebrew and numbers in English and how they compare in pronunciation. And it was really, really cool. And that's my favorite thing about learning a language, is just being able to connect with people when you travel and being able to have these little conversations about your languages. So, am I going to continue learning Hebrew now that the 90 days challenge is over? Yes. I think that I'm going to continue on learning Hebrew. I'm going to keep on with drops. I'd like to learn every word in the app in Hebrew. I think once I have a really good grasp on all of the vocabulary, I might move on to another app and try to start working on grammar and sentence structure and things like that. But yes, I definitely want to keep learning Hebrew. It's not the most practical language for me to learn. I don't really have a use for it in my everyday life, but it's a fun and beautiful language, and I'd really like to keep learning it. So there you go. That is how my 90 days went. How did your 90 days go? Please let us know down below how your 90 days went, what you learned from it, and what you're going to keep doing if you want to keep learning the language that you picked up. This won't be the last time that you see me. I'm sure I will be around in videos to come in the future. But for now, bye.